The anime started on an average school day. Haruka is sitting alone in his desk because he is a total loner. He is well aware that he is a loner, and as a matter of fact, he enjoys being alone since his only other option would be to hang out with his classmates, and he freaking hates them. There are a bunch of groups in the class, including the delinquents, the popular girls, the gym bros, and then there's the other people no one cares about. Haruka doesn't belong in any of these groups, and he's fine with that since he has a lot more time to read his books with no friends, but his reading session is interrupted when bright light appears beneath him. It looks like a summoning circle is spawning beneath the students, and for a moment Haruka got excited because he knows this means he gets to go an Isekai adventure, but then he realizes that he's been getting too much screen time for a loner, and if he knows anything about Isekai, that means he's going to get screwed over somehow. He's not about to let himself become a victim before GTA 6 drops, so while the portal is still loading, he walks up to the door and tries to leave. Unfortunately, the door seems to be bolted shut with magic, so no matter how much force he uses, he isn't able to get out of the room. The portal is almost done loading, so his classmates begin disappearing, fading away, and as a last-ditch effort to avoid his otherworldly fate, Haruka decides to crawl into the ceiling vents to wait out the summoning circle. He jumps up and manages to crawl his way into the roof of the class, but just when he thought he was safe, the summoning circle followed him through the roof and he ended up getting summoned anyway. It sucks that he couldn't stay on Earth, but since he already knows how this kind of thing goes, he expects some kind of fat king or pretty princess to show up soon and ask for his help or something. However, that's not what happens, as Haruka sees a bald old man frantically waving his arms around and panicking at the sight of Haruka. Apparently the old man is God, and he was the one in charge of the summoning, and has already sent all of Haruka's classmates off to the other world. But because Haruka came up with the idea to hide in the ceiling while he still ended up getting summoned, his summoning was delayed, so God needs to send him to the other world quickly before he gets in trouble for this mess. He tells Haruka that he will get abilities to help him in the other world, but since he's late, all the good abilities have already been chosen, so the only things remaining are all the leftover ones that no one wanted. To list a few, he has the option of picking skills that equate to Minecraft villager, gambling dice, contact lenses, and a stick. And to make it worse, he only has a limited number of skills he can choose, so Haruka begins taking out his anger on the god for summoning him here and only having trash skills left. The god knows he messed up, but he didn't graduate from God University just to get yelled at by a high schooler, so he tells Haruka that he will give him all the remaining trash skills as an apology, but he doesn't want to see his ugly face around here anymore, so he teleports Haruka to the other world immediately. It's cool that he gets to have more skills than normal, but that doesn't do him much good if he gets tossed out into the woods as soon as he arrives. He's never lived in the woods before, and he has no supplies, but then he notices a pouch on the floor and turns out that it's a part of the Minecraft villager skill, and the pouch allows him to store an unlimited number of items in his inventory. There's also a bunch of starter gear in there, so at least Haruka isn't going to be doing this without equipment. After he's got his stuff on, he decides to check his stats, but thanks to the gambling dice, he needs to roll a number to get stat points. He just goes with it and throws the dice on the ground. So as a result, he ends up with a score of M, and he has no idea what M means, so he just decides to put the M points all into his luck stat. To his surprise, when he opens his stat window, his luck stat is completely maxed out, making him wish he used it on something better. He continues looking through his stats, and to his surprise, aside from all the trash skills, he actually gained 2 unique skills as well. Because he is such a loner on Earth, he will be unable to form a party in this world, even if he wants to. But in exchange, his second skill allows him to force monsters to serve him because he wouldn't be able to make any friends otherwise. Haruka is a bit disappointed that he won't get a chance to make a harem for himself, but is what it is. Right now he's more concerned with the fact that he doesn't see any of his classmates nearby, and he finds that strange since this is supposedly the starting location. But then again, he never cared about them before, so why would he care about them now? Right now he needs to focus on getting supplies so he can live a good life out here in the woods, but that's a lot easier said than done when he can barely see anything with all the trees in the way. At this rate, it won't be long before he runs into a monster accidentally, and if that were to happen, he would be a dead man for sure. Just then, Haruka remembers that he has a contact lens skill, so he puts on the contact lenses and suddenly he can see all kinds of information about his surroundings. It turns out that the contact lenses come with an inbuilt appraisal skill, and with it, he is able to easily traverse the forest and find some mushrooms that he can eat without dying. He decides to pick some, and thanks to his villager bag he can take as many as he wants. He then goes over to the river nearby and uses his bag to fetch a little water to drink. Once he's done with that, something else catches his eye, so he wanders back into the forest, where he finds a little cave. It looks too interesting for him to ignore, so Haruka says a little prayer in case there's a monster here that will attack him, and after that he begins exploring the cave. Luckily, it looks like there aren't any monsters here, and this place is quite spacious, so if he decides to make this his base of operations, he pulls out a tent and a magic lantern from his bag to set up camp, after which he then proceeds to light a small fire with his temperature control magic so he can stay warm for the night. Coincidentally, using his temperature magic once allowed him to unlock a new fire, and being wary of monsters made him acquire several detection skills as well, but Haruka's only attack skill as a stick, so he still needs to figure out a way to defend himself. The next morning, Haruka wakes up with a jolt, so nervously leaves his tent. Into his relief, it looks like there weren't any monster attacks overnight. He is safe, all thanks to the anti-monster properties of his useless skill items, but even he is safe from harm, it doesn't mean he's safe from her hunger, so he busts out a frying pan and cooks up some of the mushrooms he gathered yesterday. And if you're wondering where he got the frying pan, he was just sitting there in his villager bag alone, the full set of kitchen knives and some beef jerky. So far that bag has been the most useful thing in Haruki's arsenal, so he wonders what kind of villager stocked it up before he got it. Any case, now that he has eaten, he needs to figure out what he's going to do from now on, so he heads outside and takes a little walk to think. For now, that cave will work well as a base of operations, but Haruka still needs to worry about finding a reliable source of food and creating safety measures against any monsters that may try to attack him in this world. Fortunately, with his contact lenses, it shouldn't be too hard for him to gather enough food to last for a while, as he finds some more mushrooms and some herbs almost immediately, but he still has to figure out a solution to his monster problem. Just then, Haruka's detection skill kicks in and he notices something going on nearby, so he decides to go check it out and is horrified. Once he realizes that the noise was caused by goblins, it would be bad enough if it was one, but there are two of them, and they both have strength stats that are higher than his own. He wonders if he will be able to take them down with his current strength, and he contemplates running away, but the fact that he is living in this forest means he will eventually have to fight the goblin if he wants to survive, so he chooses to get it over with while he still has the element of surprise. With that said, he isn't sure his stick will be good enough for the job on its own, so he tries using one of his trash to wrap the stick in magic to see if that does anything. It works out better than he thought, so he lunges out of the bushes and strikes at one of the goblins. After smacking it on the head, the goblin is dazed and confused, but Haruka doesn't stop there and proceeds to beat the daylights out of it until it finally dies. That's one down, but Haruka still has to deal with the other one, so as it charges at him he dodges out of the way of its attack. Now that he's gotten a feel for it, Haruka realizes that the goblin's attacks are actually really easy to predict, so he effortlessly evades it and then proceeds to smack it around before hitting it with a wave of magic. Having just won his first fight against goblins, Haruka thinks that's enough work for the day and decides to head back to the cave so he can rest a little. And once he's back, he roasts some mushrooms for dinner and takes a look at the club he looted off the goblin corpse. It may have high damage, but it's heavy and has a short range, and Haruka decides to continue using his stick for now. He then checks the rest of his stats, and to his surprise, he managed to level up from the fight he had today, and not only that, all his existing stats were doubled as a result. By the next morning, Haruka wakes up and has breakfast as usual, but he is starting to get sick of eating nothing but mushrooms all the time. He really wishes he could eat some meat out here, but he's going to have to learn how to hunt to do that, and before that, he needs to learn how to enhance himself first. The first thing he wants to try is the magic fusion skill he acquired, and for a quick explanation, it basically covers his entire body with magic in order to boost his physical and magical defense. It also greatly increases his strength, so he should be able to fight with much more efficiency. Additionally, his appraisal skill was upgraded to level 2, so he uses it to see if anything has changed, but the only difference is that there's a question mark next to all the descriptions. Haruka has clearly never played video games before, because he spends a whole minute trying to figure out what a question mark icon could mean, and eventually he just gives up on it altogether. Instead, he heads outside to do some magic training, and as he is leaving, he notices something on the floor, so he picks it up thinking it might be some meat, but it turns out to be another mushroom. It may be delusional, but Haruka was really hoping meat would just grow on trees in this world, and he soon realizes that he's not going to be finding any meat on the forest floor, so he decides to just go ahead with his magic train. He activates his mana infusion and takes his step forward, but with the physical boost he gets, he ends up flying forward by several meters. His body feels much lighter than before, and with very little effort he can easily dart around the forest, almost like he's teleporting. On top of that, his dexterity is greatly enhanced as well, so he can move and strike at things with precision. The first thing he does with his enhanced strength is challenge 2 random goblins, and unlike yesterday he is able to knock the goblin out in one hit. He's feeling really confident about his new strength, so he thinks he can handle even more goblins, but when he actually sees a group of 3 goblins, he starts having second thoughts and slowly backs away before he gets jumped. He decides that he has worked hard enough for today and heads back to his cave so he can practice his magic. He continues this routine and practices fighting during the day, and by night, he starts tinkering with his magic to see what he can do with it, and apparently he can make coffee tables. By following this routine, Haruka is able to eventually one-shot a goblin and create a proper table with his magic crafting, so he then uses it to create a gate for his cave so he can go out at night, and that means he can finally go hunting. He goes out for a rabbit because he hasn't tasted meat in so long, and when he finally catches up to it and is about to start cooking, he notices something else nearby. At first he thinks it's a goblin that, upon further inspection, he finds out that it's something even worse. Those are the delinquents from his class, and he really doesn't want to have to deal with them, so he intends to sneak away in the other direction, but as he starts heading that way, he realizes the popular girls are here as well, along with the gym bros and the nerds. He doesn't think the nerds are that bad since he occasionally hung out with them back in school, but he still doesn't want to have to talk to them though. Finally, he notices the student council group, which has the class rep in it, and while he may hate socializing with the people in his class, he has to admit that the class rep has always been really nice to him, so it would be the least he could do to return that kindness, even if it's just to say hello. He briefly considers revealing himself and talking to her, but then again he doesn't want to ruin the solitary life he already has. Since no one knows that he is here, he has the chance to be truly alone like he has always wanted. There's no idle chatter, no taxes, and no one to annoy him, so he really doesn't want to mess that up by having contact with his classmates because they're already pretty annoying. That's why he officially decides that he will ignore his classmates and live by himself so he can conquer this world alone. The story continues. We see Haruka hides from the other students, but one of the delinquents heard something from his direction. He is about to be discovered, but the guys end up assuming that the noise came from the bunny that was supposed to be Haruka's dinner. Haruka spies on the delinquents to hear what they are discussing, but the perverts are just talking about girls. They are some real degenerates, but Haruka knows that the class rep will stop them from doing anything to the girls. However, the delinquents have a guy named Tanaka on their side whose skill will allow them to do whatever they want. The delinquents go back to the other students, but Haruka is a serious loner, and he doesn't want anything to do with them. Haruka heads home to enjoy more of his delicious mushrooms, and he finds that his loner level has gone up. It's kind of a depressing title because it's starting to wreck Haruka's self-confidence. Haruka is still only level 3, and he blames his Master of None and Dummy skills. He isn't sure what they do, but he assumes that the Master of None means that he can't stay focused on any one thing long enough to make it really strong. However, it does allow him to accomplish a lot of different things. As for the Dummy's skill, Haruka assumes that it just makes him a puppet, which would make it the worst skill to ever exist. Haruka decides to eat his troubles away, but this just reminds him that he doesn't have any meat to eat. On day 7, Haruka wakes up to the sounds of fighting. Haruka finds the nerds in battle and he wonders if he should help them. He uses his appraisal skill on them and is shocked to find that they won't need his help at all. They have way better classes than him, and Haruka is the only NEET even among the nerds. This reminds him that unlike him, they actually have overpowered skills. Unfortunately, this is a lot like how things were in his old world. His class was full of top athletes and ace students. They even had kids of celebrities, and Haruka often wondered how he ended up there. Haruka determines that the dweebs can handle themselves, but he notices that some sneaky little monsters are sneaking up from behind them. Haruka remembers being friendly with the nerds in class, so he decides to help them out. The nerds thank him, so Haruka shows them his sweet-looking cave and they marvel at how fancy it is. Haruka explains that he just learned how to use earth magic and he used it to make his cave really secure. They wonder if Haruka did all this alone, so Haruka points out that he's always alone. Haruka wonders why the nerds are with the other students, and he is shocked when they reveal that they are on the run. It all started when everyone was transported before Haruka. Everyone was in shambles because they didn't know anything about being Isekai, but the nerds were well versed on this subject. They were already assigning points into their skills, so the jacks demanded information from them. Everyone else was falling apart, but the class rep knew that they needed to keep quiet in the woods. It was too late, however, as they were already found by a group of goblins. Haruka is shocked to hear that even the delinquents were trembling in fear, but this was the perfect time for the nerds to shine. They acted like they were the protagonists of their own anime, and they began taking out the goblins. The jocks were inspired by all the nerdy bravery going on, so they helped out and the monsters were defeated. The class rep quickly gathered herself and led everyone to a safe riverside clearing. The nerds took the opportunity to shine even more as they helped everyone set up camp. Thanks to their lifelong dedication to avoid touching grass, they became experts in all things Isekai, including survival. The class rep organized everyone and put them to work. Soon enough, everyone came together and began working as one. This didn't last long, however, as the popular girls decided that they don't want to work anymore. The class rep tried to explain that their best chance of surviving by sticking together, but the group started to fall apart. They were all tired of working so hard, so they just left all the responsibilities to the nerds. The class eventually fell apart completely, and there was nothing the class rep could do. From then on, only the class rep, the nerds, and a couple of other students did any work. The other students were just so lazy, so the nerds began to resent them. They were even in charge of doing all the fighting. The nerds were super dependable though, as they just wanted to get stronger and level up. This was because they saw what skills the delinquents picked. Some of the skills they chose were charm and puppeteer, two abilities that grant control over other people. The nerds knew that the delinquents had bad intentions, so they were leveling up to stand against them. The delinquents were working hard to level up as well because they needed to in order to use the skills. The nerds kept a very close eye on the delinquents, and they eventually heard what they planned to make some of the girls do. The nerds told the class rep, so she decided that she would have to level up as well. Unfortunately, the delinquents reached the level requirements for their skills soon after. The class rep just so happened to run into them at the worst moment, but seconds later, the delinquents were on the ground. The nerds were prepared for this very moment, and they used their seal abilities to seal the charm and puppeteer skills of the delinquents. They exposed the forced harem plans of the delinquents, so the delinquents run out of the camp. However, one night the delinquents made their return and they got their revenge by using weapons. They destroyed the camp and declared that they would be back later to cause more chaos. For some odd reason, the nerds ended up receiving all the blame for what happened. The popular girls that they kept from becoming puppets and their being the ones to turn on them first, and the other students followed. The class rep and a few other students took the nerds' side, but it was too much to deal with and the nerds decided to just leave. Haruka feels really bad for them, so he throws a mushroom party for them. Haruka ended up spending in the next day with the nerds as well, and he determined that not being a loner is okay sometimes. Haruka eventually says goodbye to his new buddies, and they offer to let Haruka join them. They're going to look for a town so they can get started as adventurers. Haruka agrees that he's closer to the nerds compared to the other groups, but he shocks everyone when he still declines. Haruka simply shoos them away, so the nerds leave. Haruka admits to himself that he would like to head into town, but he knows that with his terrible stats, he would only hold the dweebs back. The nerds seemed pretty worried about the class rep, so Haruka decides to go check on the other students. On his way there, Haruka is confronted by a kobold, but he manages to punch it into unconsciousness. Haruka is surprised to see that no students are left at the campsite, and his enemy detection skill reveals some footprints. Following the trail leads them to find the popular girls. Haruka panics and decides to get started on cooking dinner back home, but the girls try to stop him. They say that they just want to talk, but Haruka knows that being around them is the exact opposite of quiet solitude. Haruka runs for his life, but he is shocked when the girls politely ask him to stop by saying please. The girls explain that they're looking for the nerds, but Haruka assumes that they just want to put them to work again. The girls shock him, however, as they want to apologize to the nerds because they just now realize that they owe their lives to them. Haruka knows that these girls have never apologized in their entire lives, but they are very serious. Haruka breaks the bad news by explaining that they have no chance of catching up to the nerds, but they still want to know where they went. Haruka points out that they wouldn't make it out of the woods the way they are now because they don't even know how to fight. The girls are discouraged, but Haruka demands to know if this means that they're just going to give up. He demands to know if they're serious about apologizing to the nerds, and Haruka thinks about how he needs to test the girls for the sake of the nerds. Haruka's tough motivation tactic backfires, however, as the girls begin to cry. They just wanted to apologize to the nerds, but now they fear that they will be eaten. Haruka has no clue what's going on, so the girls beg for Haruka to teach him how to survive until they find the nerds. Haruka accidentally says yes, and this activates his domination skill. This makes him rule over the girls, and Haruka wonders how this could have happened. The girls end up following him around like lost puppies with soulless eyes. It's also terrifying because the girls now finish off bad guys without a single word. They even bring crystals dropped by the monsters like they are dogs returning a frisbee. Haruka tries to heal the girls, but they just heal him even though he doesn't need it. Haruka fears what the class rep would say if she saw this, and he wonders how he can cancel his domination skill. Just then, the class rep finds him, but Haruka is thinking too hard about a solution to even notice. He doesn't realize that she's there at all, so she forces him to acknowledge her. Elsewhere, the delinquents make a plan of their own and they determine that they must start by getting rid of their biggest problem. The story continues. We see when the class rep gets Haruka's attention, Haruka panics because he doesn't know what to say to her, and come to think of it, he doesn't actually know what her name is. They've been in the same class since elementary school and the class rep has always been nice to him, so she can't believe he never bothered to learn her name. A few moments later, the rest of the girls from the class show up since everyone aside from the popular girls were following the class rep's orders. Speaking of the popular girls, class rep notices them standing behind Haruka, but they look like they're currently sharing a single brain cell, so class rep thinks Haruka must have done something to them. He will like to say he's innocent, but the fact of the matter is that even if he didn't mean to do it, his skill turned the girls into his servants and he doesn't know what to do about it. He tries his best to explain the situation without making himself seem like the bad guy, but none of the girls actually believe him, so Haruka gives up on trying to prove his innocence and turns to walk away. Unfortunately, class rep forces him to stay while she checks on Shimazaki to make sure she's alright, and luckily, a little shaking at all it took for the subjugation to be undone, so Shimazaki tells class rep that she's alright. The class rep is relieved to hear that Haruka thinks that means he can leave now, but class rep still wants to find out how the whole subjugation thing happened in the first place, so she refuses to let Haruka go yet. While the girls are talking, Haruka is left alone by a tree, and since he's got nothing to do, he decides to try practicing his magic so he can expand his house once he gets home. He begins trying to figure out how to make a basement, but he messes it up and accidentally buried himself in the ground from the neck down. He's stuck like that until the class rep finds him, and she was shocked to find him buried in the dirt when she just asked him to wait a few minutes, but boredom can make a guide you crazy things. She was over to Haruka's head to grab him so he can get out of the dirt, and once he is free, she apologizes for not trusting him since Shimazaki told her that he was just trying to help everyone. Haruka doesn't recall ever saying he would help everyone, but class rep and the other girls who are already thanking him, so he decides to just go with it. Since everything has been settled, he wants to head back home, but the girls start getting mad because he wants to leave them out in the wilderness without helping at all. Class rep realizes Haruka just mentioned having a home, so she asked him about it, and Haruka explains that he had some spare time on his hands, so he just kind of built a house. Class rep can't believe he managed to build an entire house by himself while they've been struggling to manage a camp, and the other girls are extremely impressed as well, so they called a meeting and began talking amongst themselves. Class rep asks how many people Haruka's house can accommodate, and from the way he designed it would fit about 240 people, but he have to move some furniture around and empty the indoor pool though. Class rep is really jealous of how well Haruka is doing for himself, and as much as she hates to bother him, she asked if she and the other girls can stay with him for the night since they are all currently homeless. Haruka freaks out because it's one thing to invite guys to stay over for the night, but this is an entire class worth of girls and is having a hard time controlling himself. Once he calms down, Haruka begins leading them all to his house, but because of all the time he has spent roaming these woods, Haruka is far better at getting around. One of his skills even gives some helpful pointers to keep him going in the right direction. Eventually, Haruka makes it back to his house with the girls, and after catching their breath, they are stunned by the magnificence of Haruka's house. It's been so long since they've had a roof over their heads or gotten to experience the wonders of indoor plumbing, so as soon as Haruka mentions that there's a bath over in that direction, the girls start frantically running towards it and strip down right there in front of Haruka. There's no way he can handle spending an entire night in the same room with all of them, so he sets up a tent so he can be alone and prepares to go to sleep. Just then class rep walks into his tent because there's something she wanted to talk to him about. First of all, she thanks him for all his help because she wouldn't have known what to do without him. After the nerds left, the gym bros decided to leave as well, so the girls were all left on their own. It's been tough, but now that they've had a bath and a good meal, the girls are all in high spirits once more. Still, even though the things worked out eventually, class rep feels that she has failed as a representative because she couldn't do anything to help the class's situation by herself. Haruka thinks she's being a little too hard on herself because up till now she's been the one protecting the girls and kept them together. That may be true, but class rep says it just got lucky because they didn't run into any monsters out there, but if they had, she would have been powerless to protect the class, unlike the nerds. Again, Haruka doesn't think she's being fair to herself because the nerds have practically spent their whole lives preparing for the situation, so it's natural that they would be able to handle themselves well. However, on her end, this was the first time he had ever even heard about Isekai, so all things considered she's been doing pretty well. Class rep feels a lot better after hearing him say she did a good job, although her accomplishments still seem insignificant compared to Haruka, who created functioning household in just a week. She wishes him a good night and heads back inside, but with everything that happened today, there's no way Haruka is getting any sleep tonight. Early the next morning, Haruka wakes up and finds one of the girls sitting outside his tent and asking him to get up because breakfast is ready. It takes him a minute to realize what's going on, but when he finally does, he freaks out a little and says he actually wants to sleep in a little longer. The girl doesn't accept his answer and crawls on top of him to convince him to get out of bed, so Haruka gives up and asks what's for breakfast. He was expecting the usual mushroom soup of the side of extra mushrooms, but to his surprise, breakfast is actually fish today, and he is so excited that he accidentally headbutts the girl. The girl was slightly hurt, but Haruka couldn't care less because he finally gets to eat something other than mushrooms, and he absolutely loves it. Class rep doesn't understand why he is so excited to be eating fish when he has been living next to the river this entire time, but while that may be true, Haruka simply sucks at fishing, so he has never been able to catch any. For the girls to be so used to eating fish, they must have a reliable method of catching fish, so Haruka asks to see how they do it. Class rep agrees and takes Haruka at the river along with one of the girls who has a lightning magic skill, and asks for how she catches fish. She kind of just electrocutes the water until the fish stop being alive. Haruka is really impressed, so he pleads with her to do it one more time, and while the girl doesn't really want to, she agrees anyway since Haruka is helping her out. She spawns another lightning ball, but before she could throw it in the river, Haruka takes the lightning ball and seals it with his packing skill. He then tosses it in the river and is able to catch some fish as well, but on top of that, he also acquired lighting magic, so he won't be needing Lightning Girl's help anymore. Class rep asks what he just did, so Haruka explains that by using his packing skill on a particular element he can gain that kind of magic. It's probably an effect caused by a combination of his many skills, which is definitely useful, but he still doesn't think it's impressive since he still only has a bunch of useless skills. While the other girls are playing the river, Haruka sits with class rep and asks what she and the other girls plan to do after this. Class rep says the details still aren't certain yet, but they plan to head for the nearest village to try and catch up with the nerds. However, they are going to need to level up if they plan to make it out of this forest on their own, so Haruka offers to help them train before they leave. Short while later, all the girls are gathered out in the forest, and before Haruka begins his training camp, he says he would like to know what their current levels are. The girls tell him that their levels are all above 16, and Haruka begins feeling depressed because he's still only level 7 after all this time in the forest. He's honestly starting to doubt that the girls even need his help to begin with, so he decides to give them a small test and sets them up to fight a bunch of kobolds to see how well they do. The girls think this will be a piece of cake once the kobolds are only level 6, but a few moments later, they've all had their asses handed to them and are down for the count. The girls had no idea that the kobolds would actually fight back, so they all head back to regroup and think of a new strategy, and for some reason the strategy meeting is taking place in Haruka's magic tent. They can all fit since Haruka's tent is able to expand, but he still has no idea why they chose to come here. After a little deliberation, the girls head back out and they are sure they won't lose this time. Haruka is glad that they seem motivated, but he honestly doesn't think they'll be able to win this time either. Once they've left, the girl from this morning approaches Haruka and says she wants to apologize for her behavior this morning. She was intentionally getting close to him just to see if he would try to take advantage of the situation if given the chance. She admits that she didn't trust him at first, but he gave him a place to stay, food to eat, and is even helping them learn how to fight, so she feels like she can trust him and she'll be back to wake him up tomorrow with his breakfast. Haruka is glad she trusts him and says he's looking forward to seeing her tomorrow, although he doesn't know her name, so he's just going to call her Fish Girl. The next morning, Haruka is happy to receive the fish from Fish Girl, but then he hears the other girls talking about going out to fight kobolds again for revenge, but before they can leave, class rep calls them back and says they need to train first because they are definitely going to lose again if they go back to fight now. She suggests they should practice by fighting goblins, but when they actually start a fight against the goblins, it doesn't go well for the girls. Despite this loss, some of the girls still think they are ready to fight the kobolds, although a bunch of them pretend to be sick to avoid having to fight anymore. Haruka doesn't think this is going to end well, so he's prepared to intervene if necessary. However, to his surprise, the girls actually learn from their mistakes against the goblins and work together to take down the kobolds. Class rep congratulates them all on their victory and Haruka is relieved because this means that girls can handle themselves and won't need to stay with him anymore. He believes he can finally get back to his life as a loner, but class rep comes over and thanks him for agreeing to come with them to the nearest village. He knows for a fact he never said he would join them, but the class rep is really insistent, so he caves in and agrees to go with her. A little while later, everyone has packed their stuff and they are ready to leave the forest, but Haruka reminds them that they don't know what they might run into out there, so they should all keep their guard up. At the same time, in a different part of the forest, one of the boys from the class is seen running for his life, when he makes the mistake of turning around and trips over a rock. He is now cornered by his attacker and has nowhere to run, so he ends up getting strangled to death on the spot. The story continues. We see Haruka's top priority right now is ensuring the safety of the girls, since the delinquents are sure to come after them, and to do that, he needs to get them out of the forest. A little while later, Haruka runs into a giant orc, and he sees this as a good opportunity to teach the girls how to defend themselves properly, so he tells them to stand back and watch how he handles it. He charges at the orc with his stick, so the orc raises its club and tries to clobber him into the ground, but when it looks down and realizes our boy isn't there anymore. Haruka is currently hiding behind a tree, and with how slow the orc is, it will never hit him, but if Haruka wants to fight back, he needs to think of a plan. He remembers the nerds telling him that physical attacks aren't effective against orcs, so the safest bet to defeat them is use a bunch of magic. Haruka pulls up his stat window to check if he has any usable magic, and he's got all the elements at his disposal, thanks to his packing skill, but before he gets the chance to use any of them, the orc finds his hiding spot and uses its club to destroy the tree, so Haruka is forced to dodge its strikes until he has finally had enough and appears behind the orc with his stick before knocking it to the ground. It turns out that the orc died from that, and he wasn't expecting that since physical attacks aren't meant to work against this thing. The girls are upset because they didn't actually get to learn anything from him when shooting the orcs, so Haruka apologizes and says he will use magic to defeat the next one so they can learn. The next time Haruka spots an orc minding its own business, he prepares a flame spell in his hand and just casually chucks it at the orc. As the spell collides with the orc's face, the monster goes down and doesn't get back up again, so the girls are even more upset because they'll never learn to defend themselves if he keeps killing everything instantly. Later that night, the group has a lot of pug meat on hand, so they celebrated the barbecue. While everyone is having fun though, Haruka is in the back setting up as many traps as he can so they go get attacked while they sleep. His tent also has properties that prevent detection by enemies, so with this, he thinks it'll be alright. Next, he wants to plan out the route they'll be taking tomorrow morning, so he activates his math skill and it's checking out the path up the head when all of a sudden, his perception skill alerts him to the presence of someone nearby, so he goes to investigate. He notices 4 male figures emerging from the dark, so he's worried it might be the delinquents at first, but as the guys approach, he realizes it's just the gym bros and he's relieved since he won't have to fight them. At the same time, class rep was looking for Haruka and notices him talking to 4 guys over in the distance. Even if they aren't hostile, Haruka still wonders what the gym bros are doing out here to begin with. He assumed they must have been after the girls, but the bros adamantly deny it and say they came here looking for Haruka. He decides to believe them, but he still doesn't understand why they were going through all that trouble to avoid the girls though. The bros explain that they can't trust the girls, and they inform him of the skill that was even worse than charm and puppeteer skills that the delinquents wanted to use. Haruka recalls seeing something about hijack guilt, and that's exactly what the gym bros were referring to. The delinquents were really vocal with about all the things they wanted to do with their mind control skills, but not once did they mention anything about the hijack skill, so that means they didn't have it, and if the delinquents didn't have it and the nerds didn't have it either, then that means one of the girls must have the skill, and it's keeping it hidden from everyone. Haruka decides to mess with the bros a little and tells them that he may be the one with the hijacked skill, but the bros don't seem that worried. In fact, they seem relieved because they know Haruka is so much of a loner that he would never actively seek out people to hijack their skills. Haruka admits that he doesn't have the hijack skill, although he does have a subjugate skill that can turn people into his pets, but he prefers not to use it. Anyway, the bros just wanted to fill them in on the dangers of the hijack skill, so they say they are heading back into the woods to keep an eye on the delinquent since they seem pretty suspicious. Before they leave, they asked Haruka to apologize to class rep and the rest of the girls for them since they ditched them without warning. The next day, everyone gets up and all the girls seem a lot more energetic than normal, so Haruka steps away because all their energy is draining him. As he's walking away, class rep comes up behind him and says she has something she wants to tell him. She nervously fidgets about to tell Haruka that she is the one who has the hijack skill, but Haruka already knew about that a long time ago. He has an appraisal skill after all. Class rep is shocked that he knew since the only people who know about her skill are the nerds. She asked why Haruka didn't say anything before now. He knew and why he still chose to help her, but Haruka simply didn't think it was that big of a deal. She asked if he's not afraid of her because hijack is a skill that allows her to steal another person's skills by killing them, so anyone would be afraid of it. But again, Haruka doesn't think there's anything to be worried about. The nerds probably were worried about her having the skill either since they knew about it, and while they sealed the charm and puppeteer skills from the delinquents they left class rep with their hijack skill. That must mean they at least trust her to not abuse it, and the same goes for Haruka because he knows that there's no way she could ever kill someone. Class rep is moved to tears after hearing that Haruka trusts her that much, and Haruka thinks it's funny since she's been crying a lot more often over the past few days, but she says it's his fault she's been crying so much. The group continues traveling through the forest, and after they travel the considerable distance, Haruka tells everyone they can take a break for now and pulls out a box of juice to sell to the girls. Unfortunately, none of them have any money, so one of the girls offers to pay in some other way if he gives her some juice, but class rep puts a stop to that immediately, so the girl doesn't get any juice. After this short break, the group gets moving again and they're currently ahead of schedule, but it's still going to be dark before they make it to the village, so they'll have to camp outside again. Just then, Haruka notices a river nearby and he thinks this is the perfect opportunity to try something out, so he asks class rep to look after the rest of the girls while he was scouting. She asked if she can come with him, but Haruka wants to do this alone, so he speeds off before she can follow him. While running through the woods, Haruka activates his magic boost skill to reinforce his body, and then he casts weight magic on himself to make himself lighter. With this combination, he's able to move faster than ever before, and within a force, he believes he should be able to fly, so he gives his theory a test and jumps high into the sky. It looks like it's working at first, but then he starts going back down, and before he knows it he has crash landed on the forest floor. He nearly died from that fall, so he decides not to try that anymore and heads back to camp. Now when class rep sees how badly injured he is, she gets really worried, and that's what happened. Haruka explains that he launched himself up really high, but then gravity happens to be kind of fell and nearly died. Class rep starts yelling at him for doing something so dumb, but if it makes it any better, Haruka did manage to spot some berries while he was up in the sky, so he offers to make some juice for class rep, but class rep doesn't want any, so Juice Girl comes up to him and starts asking for juice again. The next day, everyone gets moving again and things seem to be going smoothly, aside from the girl that got lost and the orcs that they ran into, but despite these inconveniences, the group still managed to make it out of the woods together. All the girls are ecstatic to finally be out of the forest since the village shouldn't be much farther now, but Haruka is a bit on edge since they are vulnerable out in the open like this. The hills are blocking his views and can't tell where the village is, so he looks into his stat windows to see if there are any skills in there that could help the situation, and to get surprised, there is a new airwalk skill. He must have gotten it from his failed attempt at flying yesterday, so he tries it out and sure enough, he starts walking on air. Class rep notices that Haruka is gone, so she starts looking around for him and is shocked to see him floating in the air. Haruka looks down at her and says he just wants to do some scouting to make sure the road up ahead is safe. He looks out into the distance and things seem pretty peaceful at first, but then he notices a group of villagers being attacked by wolves. He comes back down and tells class rep that he didn't see much aside from a couple of people being attacked by wolves. Class rep thinks they need to go help them, but just because they are being attacked by monsters doesn't mean they are good people. All the girls think they should hurry over save the people, but at this distance none of them will make it in time even if they run, and what if the people turn out to be bandits or something? He personally doesn't want to take any risks that would put the group in danger, so he suggests that they should just ignore them and keep going. He begins walking away and the class rep grabs his arm and pleads with him to reconsider. She says that if the people turn out to be bandits and tries to attack them, then she will fight them off, but in case they turn out to be good people, she wants to save them. Haruka already knew class rep would be determined to help people even if it puts her in danger. But as things are, the girls still suck at fighting and there's not much they could do to help, even if they went, so Haruka says he will handle it by himself instead. The people are too far away for him to run to, and even if he tries, the weight magic from yesterday, he probably still won't make it, so he decides to try something new. He casts the magic boost and weight magic on himself. As a final touch, he using a powerful wind spell to act as a propellant. The spell is so powerful that class rep ends up getting caught in it, but Haruka doesn't notice if he blasts off and is headed straight for the villagers. While using airwalk to keep himself airborne, Haruka notices something tubing on his cape, so he turns around and is shocked to see class rep hanging onto him for dear life. She is terrified and explains that she got sucked in by his wind spell, and they are way too high up for her to let go at this point, so she's tagging along for the ride. As they start getting close to the villagers, class rep tells Haruka to stop, but about that he never actually thought a way to stop, so they end up crash landing in the middle of the fight between the villagers and the wolves. As a result, class rep is knocked out, all the wolves are instantly killed, and the people are left in utter disbelief. While class rep is still out cold, the leader of the group thanks Haruka for saving them and introduces himself as Ofter and his friend as Gatek. If Haruka hadn't shown up, Ofter's entire party may have been wiped out, so he's truly grateful to him. Haruka asks what they are doing out here, so Ofter and Gatek explain that wolves have been attacking merchants out in these plains, so the Adventurers Guild put out a request for the wolves to be exterminated, and they thought they could handle it at first, but they quickly got overwhelmed. Their carriage has been destroyed, so they are going to have to carry everything back to the village by hand, and since there's not much for Haruka to do until the rest of the girls catch up, he decides to share some of the roasted mushrooms he carries on himself for emergencies. Gatek is surprised Haruka would share something like this with them, since these are stamina-capped mushrooms and they are extremely rare, because they restore a person's stamina almost immediately. The rest of the girls from class soon show up and they are excited to meet the elf and knight ladies and Ofter's party, so they all get along well. Ofter offers to lead them all to the town he came from, so before long, the group arrives at the town of Omui and they are excited to finally be back in civilization. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the delinquents have been leveling up a lot over the past few days, and now that they've got a good amount of experience, they intend to go after the girls and get their revenge, but before they do that, they have to get their puppeteer and charm skills unsealed, so they will go in after the nerds first. That brings the episode to an end. Thanks for watching. Want next part? Subscribe the channel and turn on notification bell.